Good evening. Thank you for joining us for our last African American author series discussion. Our guest is our very own Principal Nikilia Reid, Principal of the Harvard Conservatory. Principal Reid has been a part of the Jumoke family for 3 years now, where she has served as a Dean of Students and now one of our middle school principals. She is a mother of 4, a grandmother of 2, a wife, and an author of the book Now We Write Book, a compilation of poems. Before we hear from Principal Reid this evening about her compilation of poems, I want to remind our audience and to Principal Reid, I want to remind you, and of course you know this, that our theme this year is recognizing the past, preparing the future. We believe that without these moments, we can't learn, we can't grow. And if we're not learning, if we're not growing, we don't move forward. So we thank you this evening for being with us to help us on our continuum as we recognize the past and prepare the future. So Principal Reid, I noticed as I read your book, there seemed to be a strong theme of family that came out. I'm curious, how important is family and relationship to this book?
I think it was in the sense that it's my family who's always been my biggest encourager. So my mother being my first cheerleader and the first person to, basically believe in me. I tell people the story all the time that when I was younger, my mother told her I wanted to be president, the first woman. And she told me that I could. And I believed her. I believed her. And if she said today I could run for president, I would believe her now too. Because she was always been that person. So me just even stepping out and writing in general is because of my aunts and all my family members who've always encouraged me, my husband, those people in my life. So that's why the family piece is integrated into it.
Okay, and if you had to give the audience a little perspective on kind of what your compilation of poems are about, we know there's a family theme, but is there another way that you would describe your collection of work here?
Probably giving voice, giving myself a voice, and not just for myself, but when I'm writing, I'm thinking about those who feel voiceless. And so it's an opportunity for them to hear their own voice or just be pushed or motivated to say, these poems resonate with me. I can write something. I can say something. Maybe it's not the writing of a book, but maybe it's the pursuing the career you wanted. Maybe it's the challenge that you have been putting off to the side. This book for me was me saying, here I am, I'm gonna try it, I'm gonna do it. I know it's something I need to do, so let me get out there and try. And be bold enough to say, I'm gonna put it out there and see where that goes.
And so you more or less probably address this next question, but I'm still gonna ask it because you might wanna expound on it. So in the prelude, you have a poem called Breathe. You end by saying in the hopes that it helps someone else live free. That's a quote. And so when I saw that, I was wondering, who is the intended audience? Who do you want to set free?
Somebody like me, somebody who knows they have a calling or something they're supposed to be doing, but they are scared because they're worried about what other people think. They're worried about what people are going to say. They're worried that people won't hear them. So I want other people to be free either from the things that they've gone through in their life that people try to shame them about, or just free about whatever is holding them back. So I want them to have a voice, and I want them to know you have a right to exist because you're here, and you have a right to be heard because you're here.
I'm actually going to have you share the prelude, Breathe,
Okay.
with the audience. I could do it, but I'm not sure if I'll do it justice. It's nothing like hearing from the author herself. So I'm going to have you share that with us this evening.
No problem. Breathe. Finally, getting started. Writing in my head my whole life. An exaggeration maybe, but a mind always moving. Story after story. Running. When I wake, when I sleep. My head has been creating, making up ideas about the faces, the voices, the sounds. Keeping my thoughts and the stories that have shaped who I am. Even the ones I keep secret. Telling a few people or no one at all. The stories I sometimes try to hide, even from God. As though he doesn't already know, as if he wasn't there with me. But I will no longer hide in hopes it helps someone else live free.
Wow, that's powerful.
Thank
powerful. When you read that, I was thinking back, and again, reflecting on your collection here. As a child, there's a lot going through your mind. Children, there's a lot. You're thinking about everything, all right? And I was curious as to what your childhood was like. What was childhood like for you?
Okay. So for me, I thought about when did I first start writing and when did I write things down. And it actually didn't start till much later. but I was daydreaming all the time. As an only child, I mean, I have stepbrothers and sisters, but I was raised pretty much by myself, except for my cousins. I would spend time on the bus ride home, especially because they were long rides, and I would dream, and I would think about, like, I would see people walking down the street, and I would tell a story about them in my head, and I would make those things up. When you're an only child, you often have to occupy your own time, so when I would be home, if I was washing dishes, I was a dishwasher at a restaurant. If I was doing my homework, I laid it all out like I was working as a secretary in the office. So I was always creating stories. But I feel like I had a good childhood. I mean, we had problems and different issues just like anyone. But I got a great chance to be around my grandmother, who is an amazing woman, and she is the matriarch of our family. I call her Mama, even though her name is Grandma, but I call her Mama. But I had a lot of cousins, and I stayed almost every waking minute I could at her house. So when I would get off the bus, I went to her house. On Fridays, I packed my bag to stay the weekend. If I got in trouble, my punishment was I couldn't go to my grandmother's. That's where I wanted to be. My mother would come to pick me up, and we could be eating peanut butter and jelly, and I would cry and beg to stay with my cousins, stay with my grandmother. Even now, when I go down south, it's my grandmother's house I want to be at, no matter how crowded it is, because she has this knack of making you feel like you're the only person in the room, even though she has tons of grandchildren, great-grandchildren, and great-great-grandchildren. But my childhood was good. I was busy, like you would think, even with me now. I love school. I was the kind of kid that wanted to go. I do remember a time in my life when I didn't want to go because I was having problems at a new school. My mother knew something was wrong because I always wanted to go, and I started saying, I don't feel good, I don't want to go to school. So I stayed in that school for a very short time. But for the most part, I have good memories of my childhood. And my favorite memory is at 148 Yale Street. It is where my grandmother, her house was, and where I lived in Springfield.
Okay. Springfield,
Massachusetts.
Yeah. Okay. And so you have a poem entitled Memories, but
Yep.
Memories in Shame.
Yep.
And this was a pretty interesting read for me. And you start off talking about every summer there's a portion that deals with bright and there's a portion that deals with dark.
Yep.
And I don't know if we should read it all, but I don't know if you want to contextualize this for the audience. Memories in Shame, what is this about?
So the Memories in Shame is about, and actually I'm looking, it's funny because sometimes I write my poems,
Yep.
and this is it's something to just think about. I feel like I'm led, like I feel like God inspires me and gives me the things. So sometimes I'll go back and read it and think, I wrote that? So I have to go back and look. So every summer I went to stay with my father, who was important in my life. It just happened that they were divorced. He lived in Atlanta. So every summer the day school got out, I got on a plane and I went to Atlanta. I stayed there the whole summer. But I also stayed in a house with, he didn't live by himself at the time. He stayed in a house with his aunt, and she had children. And in this house, there was a lot of chaos. I won't go into total detail everything, but it was so chaotic that I remember this one particular time. We were there, and someone was, my two cousins were fighting. Somebody ended up putting out a knife. It was very crazy and traumatic for me. And I remember thinking, this is nuts. But I didn't really know what to do about that, because I wanted to be with my father. But what would happen is I would say every time he would come, because he actually eventually moved into an apartment. But I stayed there a lot because they were so far away. So I would beg him. I don't even think I understood why I was begging him, but I would beg, let me go home with you tonight, Daddy. He said, no, Nick, it's too far away. But I think one day he realized the chaos because we moved and we never went back there again. Like I never stayed the night there again. We visited every now and then, but I never went there again. So sometimes I think parents know, they might not know how to make a solution at the time. He was, he didn't know what was going on. But some kind of way he found out, and then we never went back there again.
So I have to imagine that as a child, if you are experiencing certain challenges in life, and we all have them, to a degree, writing about them has to be somewhat therapeutic, I would say.
Mm-hmm.
You found a way to kind of get your thoughts out,
Yep.
to share them, to express yourself. I'd imagine it was helpful for
Yes.
you.
Yes.
And would that be, would this be something that you would encourage any individual, whether a child or adult, to find another outlet, a productive way
Yes.
to deal with some of the things that you're dealing with? And in doing so, it could be a book of poems.
Right.
Right?
And for me, the reason why poems, I do write other things, and eventually I'm going to do some other writing, but I think for me, the reason I like poems so much is that with free verse, you can write the way you want. No one can tell you that it's wrong because it's the way you want to present it, and how you choose to read it. You can change up the way you read it depending on the time. And so I encourage my students sometimes, get your journals, write in it for a few minutes. And so I definitely think it can be helpful. I'm not a journal writer every night, but I do have a journal that I write in that doesn't just have writing, though. It has pictures and different things and pieces to go along with it as well.
So as I was reading your compilation, I was trying to figure out what is your style, or what was your style for this book, and what is your style. And I'm glad you just spoke to your style being free write, because when I grew up, I thought of poems having to rhyme every other sentence or stanza or every other word. But in a free write, it's whatever you want. And I think that's a great way to inspire other people to, again, get your inner thoughts out, your inner feelings out, and just express yourself the way that you want to.
Thank you.
So I am going to read something from your book here. Beautiful black, like blue black, like soul black, like clapback. I'm here, black. Like real black, like Africa black. Like pure black, like fearless black. Like loving black, like never seen before black. Like protective black, like shining and not knowing it black. Beautiful black. Prior to this poem, the page before it says speaking truth to pain. And that is the poem that follows. What does that mean, speaking truth to pain?
It just means the idea that you could have pain, but sometimes if you let it out and just tell the truth, and it actually something is interesting that I wrote that then, but sometimes it was still hard to say. So like, there are parts of all of our lives or parts of our personalities, parts of us that people will make us feel like we shouldn't do or we shouldn't be. But if you embrace it, then you can speak your truth and people can't hold it against you. So truth to pain is the idea that I've been through some pain, I've been through some problems, but I'm speaking my truth. And so then I can open up about it, and then it's more freeing when you can do that. And I wrote the poem about the black is that a lot of times our culture has made it, or not our culture, but our society has said that being black is the negative of everything. But those things are beautiful things. Everything I just said was beautiful. It's like all the pieces of us, the pieces that people don't like or like to use for certain things. So our culture, we say all the time, there's a lot of people that like the culture, but don't necessarily like the people. And so this is saying the people belong with the culture, and it's all beautiful.
Wow, that's deep, and it is beautiful.
Yes.
All right, thank you. So today we've seen a lot of headlines. Unfortunately, there's been a lot of issues with national cases involving young men and police and folks not being accepting of kind of how the law enforcement interacts with African American community and such. There's a big issue with George Floyd.
Yes.
And we all of us know about that. You have a poem here called Black Mothers Before Floyd. It's on page 25. I don't know if you can kind of contextualize this for us. Tell us about this poem. You talk about it before Floyd, and you talk about it after Floyd. What is this poem all about?
So it was just about, in general, about the loss of lives that has been going on for generations. And so it was, the police brutality situation is not new to our community. It's just been on TV and it's just been highlighted. My mother's told me stories about being from the South, about boys disappearing and never coming back and no one knowing where they were. You know, in her time, she grew up in a segregated South for a time before they integrated. And so I know it's been going on. So when I wrote this poem, I wrote one version, and then after George Floyd, I wanted to just change it up a little and say, this is what I'm feeling after. And I know people are so angry, but I want to channel the anger. What are we going to do about it? Being angry and putting up signs and all that, that's great. And you know, you see in the communities where you see different tributes to people who have been slain, and that's excellent because you want to remember them. But what else can we do? Or what else are we going to do? And we're all sometimes guilty of being social activists on social media where we protest, but are there other things we can do? And some of that means speaking the words out loud, and sometimes it means taking it further, but at least having a voice to say what you feel about the situation. So this talks about how our journey has started from when we first came here, and we have not stopped being hurt in those ways. And so it starts off with, since 1619, they cried as they arrived. They cried for babies lost on ships on the way to be ripped from arms and sold. That's no different than what I think about that comparison to George Floyd on the ground. That's literally what he was going through, looking for his mother. And that situation was just the same thing that was happening to people when they got off ships. And why mothers would rather jump in the water than the sea, because they understood where they were going. And so that's a deep situation. I was just watching the news the other day. They're actually doing some research and trying to find some of those slave ships. They said there's about 1,000 that were lost. And I didn't even realize it was that many that where that capsized and there were lost people. So it's just interesting to think about that, but it's the idea that it hasn't stopped. And I was thinking this the other day. Why do so many people get frustrated and say, we're tired of slave movies, we're tired of these movies about this? I think it's because it hasn't stopped, whereas other cultures can see this is what happened to us, we've overcome that, and now we moved on. So then when they tell their story, they're not telling the story, they're still living. So because we're still living the story, it gets hard to see it and feel like, well, what's the solution? And so that's what that's kind of thing is going with.
Wonderful, wonderful. And do you think that this particular poem is more applicable for adults versus children? Is it room for both audiences? What's your thoughts on that?
I think it's for both, but with background. Like, you can't just throw the poem at kids because they won't even know what you're talking about. You have to actually go through what are they saying? What do you mean by trees? What do you mean by those pieces? And while I don't want to scare children, it's also important they know the history. And so I often am quizzing my kids at home and talking about stuff so that they understand, at least have context of what has happened in their past. One, so they don't repeat it, but also so they understand why people are still fighting, what they're fighting for, what has been fought before you, so that you can have what you have, not for a burden or guilt, but so you can understand that, one, you stand on greatness. I think this school and itself that we work at is an epitome of that, the idea that someone said we couldn't have something, so she created it for us. Yes. And oftentimes we don't remember that we came from HBCUs and places that were started by African Americans, and it can happen again. So you won't know that we can do it if no one tells you that we already did. So,
speaking of HBCUs, what college did you go to?
CAU, Clark Atlanta University.
Clark Atlanta University. Okay, so I'm a graduate of Hampton University, so we won't go there tonight.
No problem.
It's all love when
yes.
we talk about our historically black colleges and universities. So, but thank you for sharing that this evening. We do have a question that has come in from our chat line, and let me take a look. I think we have a couple of questions here. So did you have any fear or reservation about having your work published?
Yes, and it's really weird because, so first of all, I had the poems for a long time. I had some writing. I didn't know how I was going to present it. We were in church one day and my pastor was talking about him getting his book together, different stuff, and I felt convicted to talk to him about, how are you getting that done? He told me about a site called Fiverr, where they have like landscaping and there's editing. So he told me who edited his book. So she went ahead and edited it for me. And I just asked her if she knew about publishing. She said, no, I don't really know about it. But the next thing I know, she'd figured it out and put it online for me. It wasn't completely published, but it was done. And I thought to myself, I never would have done that myself. So I needed that. I needed her to push me over. And once she did that, then I was brave enough to say, yes, I'm putting myself out there, but who could be healed by what I put myself out there for? Whose lives could be changed because I did that? And I think it's important for all of us to know that somebody's waiting for you. Somebody's waiting for you to do the thing you're supposed to do so that their lives can be changed. And a lot of times they're being held back because we're not doing that.
So in other words, your work is, again, not just for yourself, but it's for others, and you understand that there's a greater purpose for your work.
Yes.
Okay, and that's a powerful piece as well. It's a testament to who you are. Thank you for that. Mm-hmm. Another question here is: have you ever, or have you given any thought about your poetry giving you a greater platform to share via the news or TV?
I have thought about that, but because I'm just getting bold enough to even do this. So what's interesting about this is we were sitting talking about, our program and what you want to do. And it came in my head. I have a book, but I wouldn't dare say it. It took someone else in the room to say, somebody in here has a book.
Yeah,
and so,
that.
Right. So I did this and said yes, because I know that there are greater things that I need to do with my poetry, with other writings that I'm going to do. And it takes taking a step. And this was one of those steps. So yes, I am thinking about that, and don't know what that's going to look like, but I am thinking about it.
Wonderful, wonderful. You have a poem called Wait, and that's on page 31. I'm wondering if you would share that with us, if you would read it to us the way that you like to have it read.
Absolutely. Wait. Tomorrow is always what they tell me. Every time I want to make a change, tomorrow, they say wait. They say you just started. But while I wait for tomorrow or the next day, a generation is left in today, in the poverty of the present, and wasted sacrifices of past promises. Promises attached to a future they will never see, have, or even dream. Because today will come and go again and again, and it will be too late. So I will not wait, because our tomorrow is today.
And so what is your message there?
So that came out of two things. Dr. King talked to me about when he talked about waiting on our getting what we're due, that we've been waiting forever. And it also comes with education, because when you start new places or you're trying to do something, people often will say, well, you're trying to do too much too soon, and this is, and I'm thinking to myself, but I've been in education for 20 something years. So I'm seeing some of the same things I saw 15 years ago. So I feel like we're waiting, and so I'm saying we can't keep waiting, we have to do. And so there's a sense of urgency that we have here, that we want to keep having, that there's things going on that are too big to keep waiting for. We have to find a solution. And I'm hoping that with all this COVID and all these different things going on with the things we're trying to do, that we will be able to come up with something unique and different, that's something we've never done before, because I think we need something we've never done before.
Thank you for that. We have another question here in the chat, and this is great, and we want to encourage the audience who are listening to keep your questions coming. If you can talk to us a little bit about your current inspiration, like what is your current inspiration?
Depends. So the poem I'm going to read later before we go is a poem that actually was inspired by two things. I was in service the other day, and they talked about we all have insecurities, and if we don't deal with our insecurities, they will come back to haunt us, and they will derail us from where we're needing to go. So we'll get to a platform, get to a place, and because of our insecurities, we'll have a problem with that. And he used the reference with Saul in the Bible and that kind of thing. But actually, yesterday, the day before yesterday, I actually was on a call with the mentor working with the program that we use. And he talked about the fact, he said this before, but he talked about the fact that we must make sure we take time for ourselves. That we have 3 days a week that's just for you. That's just about you. And so that right there, it didn't happen right away, but later in the day, it came to me, and I just had to put the words down. And then I fixed it over time. So I can be inspired by a quote. I might be inspired by a song. I might be inspired by a moment. I might just get a word in my head. It might be a color, a tree. It could be anything. And then I just start writing. I could write something today and not look at it again for 3 weeks and then add to it. I could write a poem and forget I wrote it and then go back and look and say, wow, did I write that? I've actually had to make sure I started putting my name to make sure that I did that, because, you know, there's so much great stuff out there, but that's where I get my inspiration from everywhere.
So, as a published author who has accomplished personal goals, what keeps you striving for more? And this is another question that's coming from the audience tonight.
Okay. I think just knowing that, first of all, you don't stop. Like, once you get one thing, it's just to get you to the next thing. You know, it's not like you're sitting there waiting for the next thing, but I understand that this is just one small piece in the bigger things that I'm supposed to be doing. And I also realize that what God has for me is much bigger than I probably can imagine for myself, that I know I can imagine for myself. So therefore, if it's something I can't imagine, I'm not there yet. Because what he has for me is greater than what I can ever think of in my head. So that's why I know I have other things to do.
Wonderful, wonderful. You said something a few minutes ago, made me think a little bit, and I also read something here. I mean, do you sing? I'm curious.
So I sing in my own right, but I can't sing. So that's one of the things that's in one of those poems. I cannot sing, but I think I can in my mind. But I've been asked that several times because of my voice, the way it's raspy. Yeah. But I cannot sing. At least I don't think I can.
Yeah, I did read that in one of your poems, and I don't know if we're gonna get to reading the whole thing tonight. We might, but I do encourage people to pick up your book, Now We Write book, and you can kind of hear what Ms. Reid thinks of herself in terms of her being a vocalist.
Yes.
But you talk about R&B artist Mary J. Blige, one of my favorite artists. So what is your relationship with Mary J. Blige? How did she end up in your book?
So what happened is, I always loved Mary J. Blige. I know when she first started, I said she's not the greatest singer, and they give different reasons. But what I've always loved about her is that she seemed real. She seemed like who she says she is, that's what she is. But what happened, the way I found out about her, my best friend had come to Atlanta before I got out of high school, was getting ready to go to college, and she came down. She said, you gotta hear this music. She put the tape in, and I heard the beat drop with What's the 411? We pulled over at the record store, which they don't exist anymore, and I got the tape immediately. And I have bought Mary tapes over and over because I feel like every time she was saying it, she was telling my story. Now, there are times when I had to put those aside because those weren't my stories anymore. You know, as I got older, that's not my story. But I have vivid memories of probably every song that has come out because it has told a story. And that's what I like. Some of the lyrics are very basic, but they're telling a story. And I feel like she's changed and grown over time, which is what we all want to do. You're not perfect, but you have growth, and that's what we all should be striving for.
And so I wish we had that music queued up. So I was saying, asked our IT department to play a little bit of it. I mean, but Mary J. Blige is a phenomenal artist,
Yes.
and she's performed in Super Bowl.
Yes.
And she still looks good and doing her thing. I think we would not be doing this any justice if we didn't have you share this particular poem. It's on page 33 in your book. It's called "Finding My Way," Mary J. Blige. So talk to us about it. Share that with us.
Sure. Finding My Way, Mary J. Blige. My father moved Atlanta, 3 black radio stations, a huge collection of records. A big boom box played records, never saw another like it. His car always filled with the latest hits. We sang along, an amazing whistle with the gap in his teeth. I tried to imitate, but ladies don't whistle. He wasn't around, I whistled anyway. Wondering, did people think, did I sound like my daddy? With my mom, I sang too, riding in her gray Chevy, singing one of my favorite songs, singing loud. She stopped and said, "Nick, can you sing?" No, she politely said, "I was just checking." Yeah, I knew, but I didn't care because music is my piece. Rap, gospel, rock and roll, R&B, country, just tell me a story. Not just any story, but my story. Mary J. told my story. I remember Atlanta the summer before school, my best friend came to visit. You gotta hear this new Mary joint, The Beat. What's the 401? Yeah, you got it going on. Immediately a fan. First record store bought her album on the spot. Oh, one of many. Tapes, CDs, downloads. Mary spoke my language. She was hood, but her lyrics were simple, clear and to the point. Her beats, her honesty allowed her to grow, me to grow. Not the best singer, not the most poised, not the most professional, but better over time. She worked, she changed. She reminded me I didn't have to be the best. I just had to want the best and strive to that end.
Wonderful. So we now know what's important to you. Family,
yes,
faith, and Mary J. Blige.
Yes, it's true. It's true.
Figured it out. But
yes.
That's
and
awesome.
Music, because
music
is the lyrics. I listen for the lyrics. I like beats, but I listen to the words they're saying. And it's important because I think you're speaking that over yourself when you sing. So you have to be mindful of what you're saying.
So we might maybe hear a song from you one day.
Who knows? If I get me a good coach.
Some of your poems. And,
yes.
Can make that happen. We have another question here. How do you share that black pride with today's black youth?
I start first with embracing my hair, embracing my culture, my clothes, my earrings, the way I dress. Every moment I get sharing Black History moments, constantly the school, putting it on the walls, telling them about their history. I want to do more with that because I want to make sure we have some specific resources for them. Right now, Black History Month is going through our school, and that's a part of us. But I want it all year long, and so I want to make sure that they understand who they are and where they've come from. So that's what I do. I speak what I'm saying, so I talk it, and I also remind them that the way the world has changed is from young people, so they have more power than they think they have. Kids don't even realize how much they even influence what groceries parents buy. They influence the toys they get. They even influence the music that we listen to because we're trying to figure out what you're listening to.
Absolutely.
So
yes.
They don't realize the power they have, but if they do, they can change the world, even as young as they are, and that's what I want them to know.
So you said they could change the world, and they can change the world by the stories that they tell.
Yes.
Right? You have a poem here where you talk about the stories that we tell ourselves.
Yes.
Why don't let's hear a little bit about that. Okay, that's on your page 38. So it deals with what you are telling yourself.
Yes. The stories we tell ourselves. What is the story you're telling yourself? You know the story that you play over and over in your head, the one you have the soundtrack for. It has become so loud and clear that even when a new song tries to download, you readjust your ear and get right back in line with the original melody. It is a song that screams, "I am not enough, you can't do that," and the one we all know, "Just who do you think you are?" Yeah, I know, I hear it too. You've been letting it play for so many years, you feel lost without it. It has become your playlist of excuses. It is your theme music for "I won't ever." It is your "I can't because" music. It is your pity party, your party music of "God, is you talking to me?" It is your social media declarations that are hidden behind masks of perfect pictures and positive quotes that you could believe, that you should believe, if you only stop telling your own story and listen. Instead, to the one who created all stories, my story, your story, history. His story with a proven record of victory. A story that begins with his birth and ends with him dying to show you your worth. His story created that created you for a purpose that only his voice can unlock, but only your mouth can derail. A future divinely ordered, but linked to your obedience and attached to your belief. And one simple thing. Do you believe his story or the story you are telling yourself?
That's deep.
Thank you.
That's deep. And I'm listening to you, and I'm listening, and I've read all of your poems. I'm listening to these poems tonight and in your real voice. And I'm sitting here thinking, man, she's got a lot going on in her head. There's like a lot of stuff going on here. And I work with you every day, so I know you have a lot to say, but sometimes you oftentimes don't have enough time to say everything you want to say. So I have to only wonder, in some ways, this has got to be really therapeutic because you can get everything out.
Yes.
Right? Here. Am I right?
Yes.
Is that...
No, it's true. And sometimes that's what happens. I can pour it out real fast and it just comes to me. This story actually, though, was inspired by Brene Brown. She was doing her TED Talk. And in the TED Talk, she talked about the stories we tell ourselves about our families, our spouses. We make up these whole things. You know, your husband says, this is a little salty. And you think he said, you can't cook and you should never touch the stove again. But that's not what he said. But we tell ourselves stories. And we tell ourselves stories about ourselves. We tell ourselves that we're not good enough. We can't. We won't. But the truth is, we have to tell ourselves the real story and see ourselves the way he sees us. And that's what this was about. And the more we say it, the more it becomes real for us.
Yes. Do you have a favorite poem in this particular compilation? I'm just curious, and if so, why is that particular poem your favorite? And you know, I'm just curious.
Yeah, I don't really have a favorite one. It just depends. Like, it depends on the moment. It depends on what I'm talking about. I do like the Untitled to me because I think that a lot of us are in that state, especially in where we are today. But sometimes my favorite poem is the newest one I've written. Or I've written for somebody, like I have poems that I've written specifically for my kids. I've been trying to do, when people have birthdays, to write them poems, and I've been doing more of that, but it just depends on the day.
Okay. So you've referenced that you're going to read another poem before we are done this evening, and I know in our pre-conversation, as well as just now, you referenced a new poem. And so why don't we just take the time to go there now?
Okay.
Just, you know, why don't you share with us one of your latest pieces?
Today, I choose me. Relax. My choosing me is not me not choosing you. No, my choosing me is just that, all about me. Choosing to see me with my own errors and corrections. Choosing to love me because of my imperfections. I choose to say, I talk real loud, I talk real fast, and I talk real proud. I choose to be passionate when I speak and confident when I think. I choose not to be afraid to say, I do not like being wrong. I choose me. I choose every curve, every roll, every dot of cellulite. I choose to rock my nap straight with no chaser, my curls straightened and not stirred. I choose to answer the question, just who do you think you are, with just who God created me to be. I choose me above the noise, above the pain. I choose me. I choose me. I choose me. And never again will I apologize for seeing my worth. Never again will I apologize for choosing me first. Because me choosing me gives me a light to shine on you so that you are free to choose you too.
So I'm listening to that, and that's every bit of you from what I know.
Yes.
And we have colleagues that are on tonight, and they probably agree with me. But I can see you in all of that. Okay. But what inspired you to write that?
That was what I was telling you earlier. I was inspired because he said, when our pastor said, you got to embrace all of you. Even the parts people tell you need to change, even the parts, it doesn't mean you don't grow and you're not trying to work on things, but what happens is if we don't embrace them, then every time somebody brings them up, then it becomes a barrier for us. It becomes a problem. And the reality is, I do talk fast. Sometimes I do talk loud. Sometimes, you know, I'm not the best, whatever. But that's who I am right now, and so I've got to embrace that, because if I ever am going to get on a bigger platform, I got to let that go. Because people are going to have things to say about you no matter what you do, whether you're doing it the best or the worst, they're going to have things to say.
And even in those feedback moments and those moments of reflection, it doesn't mean you're not listening.
Absolutely.
And it doesn't mean you're not growing. It doesn't mean you're not working. Maybe some stuff you don't want to work on.
Right.
Right? It's who you are. And so you're saying to those that see you, experience you, this is who I am.
Yes.
Right?
And I'm saying it to me. I'm saying it to me first. Because first, I have to be comfortable with the pieces of me that have been told to me since I was a little girl, you need to fix. So when you're sitting in the classroom and you're 6 years old and the teacher keeps telling you to be quiet because you're asking too many questions, when they tell you, you talk too much, What do you think you are? Why do you always have something to say? Those are the same things people continue to say. And it's very interesting because when I was coming up, and I've said this to people even as an adult, they never say that to the kids who are quiet. No one ever says, you don't talk enough. You need to speak up. Or if they do, they go, baby, you don't talk enough. But when they tell the girl that's talking too much, you talk too much. You need to be quiet. So I want people to know, if they're like me, it's okay to be you. You were created that way. You'll learn when to use it and when to not. But you were created that way. And who you are is exactly who you're supposed to be. And you'll reach the people who are supposed to know you for who you are.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you. I was visiting with you a few weeks ago, and you were talking to your faculty and staff about, well, one of my takeaways was that, how they should be connecting with scholars, our scholars, how to have conversations with them, challenging them to be reflective, right, on how they are or are not connecting. There's a poem here, and I want you to read it. It's called Words. Right? You remember that?
Yes.
And I think, in listening to you, you were really reminding us how important our words are. And I think it is something that's worth being read and shared tonight. Not only for, we have educators on tonight, we have parents that are on tonight, but remind us of why words are important.
Words. We all know that words are powerful. They shape our very existence from the way we think to how we speak. They live with us long after they are spoken. They reside with us even when we think we have created them and replaced them with new thoughts. Even when we think we have erased them and replaced them with new thoughts. They are the building blocks of our future directed by our past. They can shift a room to silence or move a space to tears. Words are amazing. They can fit together as masterpieces of poetic perfection, and yet we often waste their power. We use them without thinking. We hold them hostage when we are angry, and on occasion, we release them to make our petitions known before the Lord. But their power, their true power, and do we really understand? Understand the majesty of every syllable, the depth of every vowel, and the creation that occurs with every complete sentence. Do we comprehend the magnitude of our very voices? Because if we did, oh, what we could birth from our very own lips.
Words.
Words.
Thank you for reminding us the power of our words.
Absolutely.
I found this to be a quick read. It didn't take me long. I won't tell people how long it took me to read, but it's a quick read.
Yeah.
You could purchase this and be done with it.
Yeah.
the same day.
Mm-hmm.
How long did it take you to put this compilation together?
It didn't take me that long to put together once I decided, but what happened, I first had to figure out what I was originally writing a story. So the first two poems were actually stories, and I feel like I would say, don't just do a story, turn them into poems. In education, sometimes we teach, with scholars, we do what's called as a found poem. And a found poem is when you take someone else's words and take out the pieces you want, give them credit, and you use those words. So I did that with my own work. I took the writing that was written in paragraphs and like a story, and I took out the pieces that told the story in a poem. And so for me, it didn't take long to necessarily do it, but I had to get started. So I'm saying probably about 3 or 4 months by the time once I started, but the poems have been written for periods of time. Like, for example, I have tons of poems that I've written over time that will go into the next book, but it's just that I didn't write them all at once. They're just pieces, and I'll bring them together when it's time. When I feel like, okay, I've got plenty of poems, I might even put a couple of here in the new book. But I just put those poems together, little pieces at a time.
So there is a new book on the horizon?
It is. I don't know how long it's going to take, and I actually want to do something a little different. So there is a woman called Nikki Grimes. She's a poet and an author, and the way she does her books is she's written like The Bronx Masquerade, Jasmine's Notebook, and another one called Dark Sons. Now, Dark Sons is one of my favorites because what she does, she takes the story of Ishmael from the Bible, which I didn't even make that connection until I read her book. He was 14 when Isaac was born. So that means he lost his father. And we don't really think about Ishmael. We don't think about his story. So she compares it. She writes poetry and compares it to a modern day version of what that might look like. But what I like about her writing is she'll do a poem, then write something, then do a poem. So I like that style. So it might look something like that. It could be a play, not sure, but I want to do something different. But right now I'm just collecting poems to figure out what's next.
Okay, we heard it first this evening. I'm sure we're going to be looking forward to getting your latest work. So we have a couple other questions here. One of them is, what was the hardest poem that you've written?
Probably the first two, the ones where I write where it's really personal. So I would say the introduction to the Revelation, and I would say Memories and Shame. Those two are probably the hardest because they're the most personal about my life.
Yeah, and so, and I'm going to encourage our viewers to really obtain a copy of this. We're going to have you talk to us in a few minutes about how they could obtain a copy. But there are some very deep personal poems that I recognized that were personal to you, and so we purposely didn't go there this evening. But I think that the audience really should obtain a copy, read it, and they'll learn more about you as a person. And you never know. I mean, we deal with all kinds of things. It's called life, right? And you certainly address life in the first part of your compilations here. And I think I'm just going to leave it there at this point. But if I wanted to get a copy of this compilation, how would I do so? Where can I find this?
It's right on Amazon.com, and you just type in Now We Write Book, which I'm sure people probably think, why is that the title? So the Now We Write Book, the reason why the title says Now We Write Book is because remember I told you all that the person who tried to help me and she published it, that's what she gave. And I was going to change it, but I left it because I wanted to remind me this is where I started. And I'll do something different, but that's where I started. It was, rough, but it was what I wanted to show of my thing, so I left it there. But Amazon.com, and you just type in Now We Write Book and put my name, and it should come up.
So we're going to have a few copies available to our viewing audience as well. And as I've done with all the other guests who have come on, I've asked folks to, if they would like to be considered to obtain a copy, to just share with us or share with me their email. They can put it in the chat, or you can email me directly at monroet@jumokeacademy.org, and we will enter your name into a raffle to obtain a copy. I have a few copies that have been ordered, and we're waiting to receive them. Okay. Otherwise, you can go on and order it for yourselves at Amazon.com. We have another question here. It says, what do you think about speaking in public with your poems to young children, our youth?
I think I'm okay. I will say the first time before I wrote the book, the stories we tell ourselves, I actually read we had something at church, like we were doing talents, and I read it, and I basically almost ran off the stage when I finished because I was so nervous. I've read other people's work, done plays. I was fine with my own work, made me nervous, but I think now I'm okay. I think I could definitely do it. Wouldn't have a problem with it. It's just a matter of just who and when or who would like to hear, but I'm fine with sharing it. And I think in a smaller audience, it's a little different to know your audience, so sharing some of the other poems might be a little different.
Would you ever consider doing a poetry workshop for adults and or children?
I don't know. Well, yeah, I guess I could do for adults. I definitely would do for children, like teens. I think that would be great. I think poetry is such a cool way for kids to express themselves, and I've actually done it before. In a previous place I worked, we did what we called change talks, similar to TED Talks. Our scholars were struggling to write, and so once we told them they had to perform, they became more involved. They had debates. They talked about it, but that's where our poetry started. And when I did the Bronx Masquerade as a teacher, Bronx Masquerade. When I did the Bronx Masquerade as a teacher, it allowed me to have the kids see someone else, and then we started writing our own poems. We published a book we produced a book for them.
So you are available for hire, or
yes.
Not for hire, but
I know what you mean.
available.
I can, yes.
If folks are interested in having you come on,
yes,
out to various small groups or schools or what have you to work with us. Okay, wonderful. So I'm looking to see if we have any additional questions before we begin to wrap up here. I'm scrolling through. I'm not seeing anything just yet. I'm going to have you end with one last poem. And let's see, which one would it be? I'm thinking it's going to be Lines, Lines, lines. And before you read that, are you a person that stays in the lines, or you like to go outside of the lines?
What do you think?
I think you know what I think.
Yes,
but
I'm gonna read the poem, but let's go with that.
All right, read the poem.
Okay, lines. I have always drawn outside, refusing to conform, but never creating my own. But in my approach, my thoughts, my being, hard to stay in the lines, my mom's lines, born to form lines, not living them. She set the standard. She created the mold. So like any good daughter, I refused to be in her lines. I fought it every step of the way. She wore it, I didn't. She believed it, I wouldn't. She wanted it, I hated it, until one day I realized I'd actually fallen right into line with her lines when I dared to form my own. So yes.
Lines. And
Lines.
so you heard it straight from Principal Reid herself, and you can answer the question that I asked
Yes.
her originally. We've learned a lot about you this evening, Principal Reid. It's been a pleasure having you on as a guest, closing us out for our Black History Month series, spotlighting African American authors. Thank you so much for being with us. And any closing remarks before we close out tonight?
Just thank you for having me, but also I challenge everyone that's listening. Do the thing. Whatever you've been holding off on, whatever you have not said that you're going to do, the book, the play, the place you need to go, take a step. If it's just looking it up tonight and you're supposed to take a trip, if it's writing a line, write one line tonight. Whatever it is, try and just take a step.
Thank you very much. Again, Principal Nikilia Reid, Now We Write Book. We are so happy to have had this time with her, and we want to thank our audience who participated tonight. We also want to thank you if you participated during our last two authors. We want to thank you for joining us during that time as well. Thank you to our IT department, our communications department, and everyone else behind the scenes to help make this series a reality. Have a great evening, and thank you again. Good night.